bit. We got a good, strong connection into Second Life over here. We got a good, strong connection in the booth, but we're having a little trouble down here for the panel, which we hope to have in both places at once, and hopefully we'll have that up and running, and so we'll see how that goes. But we're going to go ahead and get started with the session. And so I think everybody knows who I am, Larry Johnson with the NMC. This is going to be kind of a laid-back and kick-back session. I want to welcome everyone. Behind me on the screen is a live shot of Second Life, the NMC campus, and we are streaming into the screen on the Gonic Amphitheater. I want to welcome all of the folks in Second Life who are there to join us, and there are a bunch of folks sitting there in the amphitheater, so wave everybody. Hey folks. Hi Heidi, hi Seb, hey Jampa. So board members, I see that Jean-Paul is there, that's Jampa Borbelli there, and welcome to the folks in there. We are very honored to have with us here in Cleveland tonight two of the builders of Second Life, Giff Constable and Sarah Van Gordon, two of the key folks who worked with us over a period of about 6 weeks to build this pretty magnificent construction. And you're going to have a chance to ask questions of them, as are the folks in Second Life. We're going to have a building demonstration so you can see how they did it. I think that's going to be something that you're going to really enjoy seeing. But to start things off, we want to show you a video that is literally just out of the can. It's so new that we haven't actually put the credits on it yet, or the titles. But if we could go ahead and roll that Second Life video, we'll start with that. We want to show you that if we could dim the lights a little bit, please. You act like I have controls.
The new Media Consortium is an international not-for-profit organization of nearly 200 leading colleges, universities, museums, corporations, and other learning-focused bodies dedicated to pushing the edge of new media and new technology. For several years, the NMC has been at the forefront of using the two-dimensional web as a space for convening people around new ideas and knowledge sharing. The rich, interactive, three-dimensional NMC campus is located in the virtual world of Second Life. The campus extends the NMC experience into 3D virtual space, providing a space for insightful interaction, collaboration, learning, and experimentation, while encouraging the exploration of the potential of virtual environments. It is a place intended to inspire creative ideas and stimulate thoughtful discourse related to the potential of such spaces. It has been designed to be playful, yet serious at the same time. The campus itself encourages exploration and interaction, and most visitors will find something new on every visit. There are dozens of wonderful little niches and things to discover. Like the World Wide Web before, Second Life is a platform that allows users to share their ideas and creations with others around the world. But Second Life extends the internet into a three-dimensional world where visitors can interact in real time in a shared virtual space. 75% of users in a rapidly growing population have contributed content to a world that is 100% user-created. As a place of endless creativity, Second Life provides a richer creative social experience than is available on the 2D web. Unpredictable, emergent behaviors abound in a world where users are given free rein. And many Second Life residents have turned their play environment into their real-world careers. Lindex is a free market currency exchange that enables content creators whose varied skills range from graphic design to software development to sell digital goods for real money. Entrepreneurs in marketing, real estate, and professional services have created professional companies around the platform. A secondary market of contractors has emerged to support entrepreneurial efforts. The NMC campus exists in this virtual universe and is designed both to complement and extend it. The societal and economic aspects of Second Life inform the mission of the campus, which is to demonstrate how rich virtual worlds like Second Life can be put to productive use, solving real-world issues. A variety of meeting spaces facilitate this work and allow the exploration of the human side of working in a 3D virtual environment. The library and museum are experimental spaces. The Malcolm Brown Library is the focal point of experiments exploring the intersection of 3D virtual space and the web. The Aho Gallery and the Constable Room are places where the boundaries between art and representation and between art and derivatives are explored. Originally built to support a series of virtual conversations for the MacArthur Foundation series on digital media and learning. Given the tremendous response it has received, a wide range of activities are now planned for the NMC campus. From large-scale virtual components of real-life events, like the NMC Summer Conference, to events held entirely in Second Life, one possible future of the NMC campus is to be the home for a series of NMC meetings in virtual space. Already underway is a significant use of the space by undergraduate and graduate classes interested in virtual environments, and much more such use is planned. What is most likely, however, just as in all of Second Life, is that the visitors to the NMC campus will find uses for it that we cannot possibly imagine today. To learn more about the NMC's journey into virtual space and to follow along as the project progresses, see the NMC Campus Observer, a blog set up to record not only our insights, but those of other Second Life residents as well.
Okay, so that gives you a sense of what we're planning to do, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Sarah Van Gordon. Come on up here. Gift Constable, who are known in world as Corey Ito and
Forsetti Svarog.
That's right. I know him as Forsetti because I can't say the second one.
Right.
And Corey is an incredible designer. She has many of the same skills that you guys do, and GIF is as well. And so with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to them.
All right.
And we're going to have some fun.
All right. Can you guys hear me properly all the way in the back? Good. I don't have the benefit of cool space age music behind me, which is kind of unfair, I think. But we're going to try to keep this fairly informal and fairly short, sort of buzzing through the campus a little bit and talking about some of the high-level concepts behind Second Life, and then really open it up to Q&A from you guys. And my hope is that after last night, watching the way the band was playing, you guys are not a scared bunch. You guys will chime right in and ask some tough questions, which we can dig into. Second Life, for those who don't know, was made by a company called Linden Lab out in California. They're up in San Francisco. And what they're trying to do is build really a platform, an underlying platform for an immersive three-dimensional space. In the same way that your browser can interpret programming languages in HTML, they have a client that can interpret three-dimensional information and scripted information to create a very rich dynamic environment like you see in front of you. It's totally open-ended, so it's very unlike the persistent games that are out there, like World of Warcraft, where there are rules and you sort of play a role and you go and you try to win. This is open-ended, and actually it leaves some people a little bit puzzled about how to interact with Second Life. They get there and they go, well, what do I do now? And really it's anything you want. The entire world is made by the residents. So just like we built this entire infrastructure that you see here, the rest of the world is likewise. It's generated. All the clothing that is made, all the hair that is worn by the avatars, the animations to make an avatar dance, to make them move, that is all created by residents that have joined Second Life. Sarah, who I call Corey and Sarah interchangeably because we knew each other as avatars in Second Life before we actually became colleagues in the real world. So if I refer to her as Corey, don't be surprised. We both came to Second Life, we both discovered it in November of 2004. It really kicked off in late 2002 and went through a few evolutions, and it's been an interesting ride since then. We're going to start showing you a few things over at the Sporer Commons. This was a really neat project for us. Larry and NMC came to us in February of this year with this concept of building out a space to explore virtual worlds, to explore discourse and education and how people can use virtual worlds. And he was very prepared, had come in and done a lot of research, and gave us a document saying, I want this sense of wonder and exploration on the island. I want these certain buildings with functions for people to be able to interact formally in a lecture situation, or to be able to interact informally, sitting at the side of a pond with their toes floating in the water, as you saw in the video before. And what we tried to do in creating NMC was take his requirements and design out what you saw. And it went through a few iterations, but everything you see here was done over about a 6-week period. So in terms of just the creative environment of what you can do in Second Life, creating something of this scale in 3D for a lot of people used to older applications in 6 weeks is actually a little bit surprising. You can very inexpensively and very quickly build some very rich environments in Second Life, so it's a neat platform that we all have. The common area, one of the interesting things about Second Life is it is fundamentally a social platform. There are two sides to Second Life that you see. There is a consumer side, which is what the Business Week article that made the cover a few weeks ago was primarily talking about, is how are consumers coming to Second Life and how are they using it? And people are using it for all sorts of things. They get on there to play, to dance, to meet people, to be entrepreneurs. All the sort of resident creations that I was talking about, a lot of people have businesses that they now support themselves entirely with. What's interesting about an immersive environment like this is the bonds. Yes. The fellow who made those robots, and he made a lot of the wonderful sculptures upstairs, is actually a math PhD at Stanford. And you see these incredible, you could obviously tell he likes math when you see a structure like that as well, but he has a great sense of humor and has some whimsy. Bring it up to Stella's Prim sculpture as well. This is one of my favorite sculptures in Second Life, just to take a slight tangent here. Everything in Second Life is made up of very simple building blocks that are called prims. And so this is a perfect example of how you build things. This is the evolution of the prim. And so you start with a box, and you start with a sphere, a box, a cube, and you can twist these things around, change them, stick them together, then texture them to make something very rich. Stella is one of my favorite, Stella Costello is her avatar name, one of my favorite sculptors in Second Life. But I was talking about social interaction and relationship building, and not to dwell on that too long. But when I first came to Second Life, I was fascinated by the creative elements, how it was sort of an open canvas for people, and I was fascinated by a lot of the intellectual things going on in terms of intellectual property, the fact that people were creating governments, local governments within Second Life and whole towns. There's a whole economy of about $5 million US dollars in transactions of goods and services every single month that's going on in this economy. All that stuff really caught my eye. What I didn't expect was to find a year and a half later that I would have some very, very good friends and even colleagues that I've met and worked with. And there's something about an immersive environment where it is not the same as talking with someone in real life, where so much of what we have in our interaction is nonverbal. But at the same time, it is much more powerful than the disembodied forms of communication like email, instant message, and the phone, where you are talking. Somehow when you're a 3-inch human and you're talking to another 3-inch human, and you've invested some of your creative energy in customizing your avatar, and your imagination then folds into the computer, and the person you're talking to all of a sudden becomes a little bit more real. I think that psychologists and sociologists are going to have a field day with Second Life over the next 10 years. I can't put my finger on why this works, but for some reason, the bonding and the relationship building that goes on in Second Life is really strong. And this is why we think it has a chance to, in a lot of ways, help at a very macro, ambitious scale, make the world a smaller place. Television has been doing that to a certain extent, and the internet has been doing that to a certain extent. But the internet is, to a large extent, sort of you on your own in front of the computer interacting on your own with the internet. Well, this is fundamentally a social experience. And of course, technology is fast, and human behavior changes very, very slowly, so it's going to take a long time. But I'm a big believer in what this can do for society and even the world in terms of bringing people together because of the relationship building. We're going to hop over quickly to the museum. One of the things that really excited me, because I'm a bit of an art freak, is that Larry wanted to build a museum. So I designed this museum. I live in New York City, and so I have the Met and the Guggenheim and the Whitney right next door, and the MoMA. And this was sort of a play off of the Guggenheim, and we were really lucky. I wanted to thank Peter Samus from the SF MoMA for allowing us to take some of the SF MoMA artwork as part of the first exhibition in here. But the museum to me really represents how Second Life and this type of platform can help spread knowledge around the world. And it isn't just for art, but it's an interesting example of how this works. What you have with museums around the world is very large collections that people can't see unless they can travel to the actual museum. And all of a sudden you have the ability now to take some of those collections and share them with the entire world in the setting that the museum actually has. On the internet, you sort of browse around clicking from picture to picture. But a museum, when you walk into a real museum, you have a structure, you have architecture, you have light, you have sound, and it's also a communal experience. You are seeing art and experiencing art with other people around you. And you have the same opportunity to do that now in Second Life. You can choose what types of paintings are next to each other now, instead of like the net. You can show size and proportion of why did one artist choose to make one painting small or a sculpture small and someone else decided to make something huge. All those things can now be brought into something in Second Life, and it can be shared with the entire world. So, the notion that a virtual world can break down geographic boundaries for education and for art and knowledge sharing is a really powerful one. Let's hop over to the lecture hall. Even we, who have been in Second Life for a little while now, sometimes find it hard to get around. The technology is definitely not 100% in terms of ease of use. You will see when you get into Second Life. Can I get a raise of hands, actually? I meant to do this at the beginning. How many people have been inside Second Life so far? Ooh, great.
Cool.
Very nice. How many people have had an embarrassing experience with their avatar in Second Life? It's universal. It is, expect to find yourself all of a sudden not wearing your clothes and wondering, oh my God, what just happened? Expect to find yourself with a box in your head. Expect to find yourself, your hair will disappear, or there you go, or you, all of a sudden you realize that you deleted half your house. Our fearless leader here, Larry, deleted half the museum one day, and we had to grab someone from Linden Lab, thank God we've got some strings to pull in there, to roll back the entire sim to the previous day's recording, because it would have been a little too much work to redo it all.
I actually have pictures. It looked pretty cool. The art was still there, just no walls.
Yeah.
It was a museum without walls.
But like anything, like any early technology, there are bumps. So there are some real benefits to using Second Life, but expect to have some bumps. Some of the ease of use is a bit of a hurdle in terms of how you move around, and people find it a little bit clunky at the beginning. You'll get the hang of it, and you'll learn how to zoom in on things quickly and move the camera around quickly and when to fly and when to walk. It doesn't take very long, but at the beginning, it feels really uncomfortable, and everybody goes through that. So as you're exploring, you know, if you get embarrassed here or you find it a little bit uncomfortable there, everybody goes through it. And it's only going to get easier. Linden Lab is improving the technology all the time. So we are over by the Malcolm B. Brown Library, which is an example of most of the other buildings here we just designed from scratch. This one actually, Larry requested that we model it after the Beinecke Museum on Yale campus. And that was a really fun thing to try to do. Because we couldn't get the light coming through the stone in the same powerful way that you see on Yale campus, we tried to do something else interesting, and we actually tried to bring the building to life a little bit. The colors of the walls will change depending on how many avatars are in a particular place. So if a bunch of people are congregating around a seating area to have a conversation, the tones will get warmer and warmer. It starts gray, and then it gets yellow, and then it gets orange, and then it gets redder and redder. That's just a very small example of how you can make things dynamic. You could be in a building, and as people are saying things, pick up keywords and have the building around them change. All of a sudden, instead of a building, maybe they're sitting on a giant butterfly. The rules, there are no rules. We didn't break too far from the real world in a lot of the sim here, but you really can go anywhere you want. There are no physics. You don't need to have roofs. There's no weather. It's wherever your imagination can take you. These are some of the books that NMC has done that they brought in. Let's hop up to the sandbox. I don't want to run too long. We're going to talk really quickly about building rather than some of the more theoretical stuff about Second Life, which we can get into if you guys have questions about. Happy to drill into those. Yesterday I had some very interesting conversations about Second Life and sort of all the issues around it in terms of intellectual property issues and policy, and that could all be quite fascinating. But for a second, we're going to talk about building. So we have a little ride that takes you up to the sandbox. What you see in front of you are the core building blocks that you have to work with. And there's two elements to any build. Well, there's more, but there's really three elements to any build. One is the 3D information. The 3D structures are built off of these little components called prims. Every building block is called a prim. And these are the core pieces that you have to work with. What you can do with these is hollow them, twist them, cut them, change them in lots of different ways to make even more shapes. And then you combine them together to make even more complex shapes. So here is an example of a line of boxes that go from zero hollow to fully hollow. And then the lighter blue line goes from a prim that is not cut to fully cut. And the pink one is where you're twisting the prim, and the last one is where you're actually tapering the prim. Just to give you an example of how this works, think about 3D objects in Second Life like an alphabet. You need to understand the basic underlying letters that you have to work with. Then you can form words, and then you can form books, very complex books like NMC here. There's a place in Second Life called the Ivory Tower of Prims, where all of us have gone to learn. And what it does is it has example after example, just like this, of what are the different permutations of prims that you can get. And then a few practical examples of how you put things together. The second component of building is texturing. You can create textures in Photoshop, you can create textures in PaintShop Pro, in GIMP. You need to load them either as a TGA file or as a JPEG file. If you want to have transparency so that part of it is actually invisible in the world, then it needs to be a TGA file. But textures are what change a mediocre build into a magical build. The campus that you see around you is so rich. It's the 3D information of those buildings is kind of interesting, but it's the textures, in my opinion, that really bring it to life. This is a little fun thing that Sarah and I made as a Halloween present for a friend of ours. I think it was last Halloween, was it?
Yeah,
Yeah, And we left this, Mistress Midnight owned Midnight City, which a very colorful friend of ours named Amy Weber is now actually in charge of it. But there was a pond in Midnight City, and on the night before Halloween, we left Chester, our little deep sea friend, in the pond for her to discover the next day. But he is basically just a whole bunch of combinations of those shapes, twisted and combined into this giant creature. But the real magic is the Photoshop work that Sarah did to bring him to life and make him oily and scary and sort of disgusting. And so it was, and there's an example of an image which was done in Photoshop, and then you load it and it maps to the actual print, and that really brings the builds to life. The third component, which isn't necessary but can add some richness, is actually programming. So the scripting language on top of this, which can make things dynamic, which can make them move. If you want to have a windmill, for example, you want the rotors to turn. You can bring things to life that way. And so some people are experts in the scripting language. You see people collaborate so that you'll have a lot of our bigger projects. Sarah will work with someone who's very, very fast with doing the 3D information, but isn't as good in Photoshop. So he'll lay out the 3D build. Sarah will come in and will texture it with her beautiful style. And then we will have a programmer who can come in and bring it to life with the interactivity. So that's a little bit about building in Second Life. There's lots of different places we could take this conversation, but I'd really prefer to open it up to the floor and hear your...
That's Cyprian,
Alan, was
by the way.
this who you were blogging about on the Campus Observer? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's Cyprian.
There's a lot of people actually ask us how things are being used. I talked a little bit about the consumer angle of it. We, as Electric Sheep, we're a partner of Linden Lab. We work entirely on top of this platform, just like Sapient used to work on top of the web. Web consulting companies did. And so corporations and nonprofits come to us to build out environments within virtual worlds. We work also with their platform, and we're looking at a few others. But in terms of just creative flexibility, Second Life, I think, right now is the best. And we have folks coming to us with lots of different types of projects. We have a big music label that wants to have concerts within Second Life, so that, you know, if they've got a big band, if you can't get to Madison Square Garden to see them, you're out of luck. Or maybe you'll catch it on pay-per-view a later time. But think about being able to have a concert where thousands of people from around the world can log in and sort of participate with, it's not the same energy, sure, as dancing in an environment with a live show going on, but still, to have an interactive experience, being a fan of your favorite band, surrounded by other fans and chatting about it as you're listening to music, and potentially watching avatars of the band members up in front of you moving the way the band members do, can be really neat. That's one example. There's some media companies that are looking to do virtual communities for television shows, so that you can come in and dress like the characters and be in a town where the is that Barnes? No, no, that wouldn't be Barnes. Be in a town where it's shot, and there's a lot of people looking to use it for simulation and training. We had one group, an educational group, that wanted to run their students through a simulation of I think in particular they were training people in the automotive industry, and so how to deal with difficult customers that come into a dealership, and to run a simulation where you actually build a replica of the dealership and have some avatars come in and be a pain in the butt. And see how people react to it, and then sit there and talk to them about, okay, how did you handle that, and then run through a scenario again. And there's lots of different ways this can be used. There you go. So anyway, I'm going to stop talking for a second and ask, does anyone have any questions, either from Second Life, and Sarah's going to try to monitor that, or here in the audience for any of us?
That's because I had not busy on my avatar, which meant that I wasn't going to get any instant messages while I was doing the tour, things like that, and it blocks out the local chat as well. I just took that off, so you'll start seeing people start to talk now on my screen.
Who else is there that we know right now?
Well, Larry's there, I can see.
Why not? You know, one of the things that struck me about Second Life was that people invest an awful amount of time in their avatars. And you meet people and they literally do spend hours and hours and weeks, months even, investing time and thought. And you know, we talk about my avatar. My wife actually, Lupita, where are you? Okay, Lupita advised me on my avatar for many hours. The eye color, the hair, the buff.
And that's the best you came up with?
You know, she likes it.
Yeah.
Okay, you know.
Sorry, Lupita.
Is that the best that I came up with? If I can make her happy with my avatar, that's good
all
enough
that
for
matters.
me. And you know, but there are folks, you can actually tell the age of. You talk about people's age in world. I started in Second Life in January, so I'm about 6 months old, which is actually in this room pretty old.
Right.
But you can tell someone's age in Second Life by their avatar, just by you look at their avatar and you know, their clothes, their skin, their hair. And how sophisticated all that is tells you a whole lot about how long they've been in Second Life, because people spend a lot of time developing that alter ego. And in fact, several people that I've met have more than one. And it's an interesting dynamic of spaces like this that I've enjoyed thinking a lot about how that works. And we even have an example of an alter ego here. So.
Right. I actually still don't like my avatar. The Linden Lab is really improving how they can look. I still find it frustrating that I can't make my avatar look like me without a whole lot of work. And we'll get there. I think eventually what you'll see is that it'll become very easy for people to work in Photoshop or maybe even have an automated system where you could load a picture of yourself and an avatar will come out looking fairly close to you. But we're quite a few years away from that. But I see sort of a time when people are interacting, they sort of have their serious avatar, which looks like them and maybe has their real name and identity is associated with them, and maybe they have a play avatar, which is as wild as they want to be. Go ahead.
What is the underlying reason why, in fact, you continue to use handles rather than names, real names? I know you can get away with the first part. So
Right.
But is there a reason that you or Lyndon basically have chosen to continue? Everyone here saying, so who are my friends? Who do we know who's in this space?
Right.
Of course, if you hang out there, you recognize.
Right.
Why not just essentially allow for the sort of real world to meet the screen world?
Right. Well, identity is definitely a big issue. One of the reasons why is just technically, Linden Lab has a shorter list. You have to choose from a list of last names. And because you can't have your last name right now, and I'm not sure when they may move beyond that. I agree with you that eventually they should move beyond that. But if you can't have your last name, then are you going to have your first name? I think that a lot of people, when they're starting to explore an environment like this, you know, we build some closed environments like the NMC here, which is sort of a safe place within Second Life. There's a lot of Second Life that is a little bit wild and hairy, as anyone who's been in there knows. There's, like the early days of the internet, entertainment, porn, all of that exists within Second Life as well. And some people act very, very strange. Part of that is driven by anonymity. I think that a lot of people, when they first come to a platform like this, actually like the safety of not being themselves, not having to worry about doing something embarrassing and having that reflect on who they are. So you can come and you can learn about something, and then maybe you go create your actual real avatar, but it acts as a protection. Now, just like the internet, anonymity brings out the best in some people and the worst in some people. So for some people, it's incredibly liberating. For the first time in their life, they can try to be, what they never could. They can escape the confines of the society that they live in. And that's really empowering. And it's an interesting thing to see. You see it in a lot of ways in Second Life. There's a number of people who have Asperger's syndrome in Second Life, and Second Life is just heaven for them. So these are folks that have a really hard time interacting socially, person to person in real life. But on Second Life, it comes naturally to them. They're some of the most talented and popular people in Second Life. Torley Torgerson is one of the most famous avatars in all of Second Life, and has now actually been hired by Linden Lab to be sort of a community representative. She's called Torley Linden now. Very, very quirky. Torley has Asperger's in real life, and but in Second Life, she is the most popular person in town, and everyone loves her. She gets along with everybody. So I think that we're going to evolve to a place where you have both. Right now, for technical reasons and maybe for cultural reasons, it's largely through pseudonyms.
So Larry, do you want to sort of just share with others sort of what your thought was beyond sort of the ad hoc dancing and playing, what you imagine and we've already begun to play with this sort of broader community here at the sense of the use, whether they're or the library?
We have put a considerable amount of thought into that, and you can go around Second Life and find an awful lot of interaction where folks are getting together, a lot like what you're seeing there, and they're chatting about this or that and the other, and dancing, and we expressly are trying not to do that, although there certainly is a place for that, and I don't mean to diss it. But you notice that when we made our video, the story that we told, it didn't have any dancing in it, because that's not what we are really wanting to try and do with it. We're really wanting to try and find a way to explore virtual world in a way that you can do work. And so what we tried to do when we built the island is to create spaces where you can bring people together to collaborate. And so what we found is that an important component of Second Life that you're not seeing, it's a very visual experience that we're having right now, is the importance of having an audio channel. And we've been experimenting with all different kinds of audio. We've used Skype, we've used Team Talk, we've used a number of other strategies. We're setting up a streaming server so that we can deliver one-way audio as well as different kinds of strategies for two-way audio. But what we found is that it really adds a lot of dimensionality above just a conference call. And we've begun to use it for staff meetings, actually. We've had quite a few staff meetings in there. And certainly when we did the project, we had all of the planning meetings were in there, and certainly they made sense in there because it was about planning this. But there's a certain aspect of it that by placing your avatar in there, particularly in the sense that people invest a lot of themselves in these avatars, and so when you put your avatar in the proximity of another avatar, you actually feel like you're kind of with that person, even to the point that your avatar has a personal space around it, so that if you bump into somebody's avatar, you say, "Excuse me," and it's funny if you're in a work context. And no, I'm not going to tell the story. She's laughing. If you're in a work context,
That was big and important.
yeah. When we're out in the foyer, I'll tell it to you individually. It's a really good story, but there are behaviors that are work appropriate and work inappropriate, and. Well, for instance, if you're at work, you wouldn't necessarily. Okay, I'll tell the story. Let's go. Could you show me a pose ball?
I certainly can.
Yeah. Take me to a pose ball. And there are these devices that we place all over the island called pose balls, and we put them around expressly to make people feel comfortable. And you click on them, and it will animate your avatar and cause it to do different things. Well, this is really nice too, because you can literally just splat yourself on the island and you won't die. Or if you're like me, you can get a parachute and you can skydive to the island, which is kind of fun too. But the pose balls, we use them all over the island so that people can click on them and park their avatar. And you saw them in the video, the people that were sitting there dangling their feet in the water. We have those all over the place. We have some that will allow you to swim in these inner tubes that are here. Okay, those right there would be fine. Yeah, that's a good one. You sit on the lily pad. So you can sit on the lily pad and dangle your feet in the water. And we've got these all over the place. There's dozens and dozens and dozens about them. And Rachel and I were out exploring another island as we were designing this one. And we were on the phone talking and walking around, and we found these pose balls on this place. And there was one like this, and so I sat down. I was dangling my feet in the water, and I'm saying, "Oh, come sit over here," you know. And so she did, and it was kind of a nuzzling pose ball. And it was like, undo, undo. Because it was work inappropriate, you know what I mean? And it was striking in that way that, you know, your avatar has a personal space, and that was a light bulb came off in my head, and it was like, you can use that to make people feel comfortable as well as uncomfortable.
Yep.
Yeah, and the second one may even be more interesting, but the first one was the one I was interested in making people feel comfortable. And so that you could bring them together, and we actually, you know, refer to it, you can park them, but actually what it is, you make them feel comfortable by putting them in places where they can sit their avatar down, and they don't have to really focus on anything, but their avatar looks very comfortable. For example, you know, riding in the gondola or something like that, and that allows then a conversation to just flow kind of easily. And so we have all kinds of spaces like that where you can have conversations in groups of 2, groups of 3, groups of 5, groups of 8. It's actually engineered for this. Groups of 10, groups of 12, groups of 20, groups of 32. The amphitheater will hold 60 sitting down, 72 standing up. We have the ballroom, which will hold 100. And so there are literally meeting spaces for all these different size groups. And we've been doing experiments with which size groups seem to work the best. And the sweet spot actually seems to be groups of between 2 and 25. You know, really, really big groups, it gets to be more like watching a video. But when you have groups smaller than 25, you can actually really have some interaction. And so we've been using the island to experiment with how do you actually collaborate and do real work in these spaces. It's not just about dancing. And then the classes that we've been bringing in here are actually looking at it from that perspective as well. And that gets to be very interesting when you look at it from that perspective. And what we're hoping is that as tools, open source tools like Croquet and other tools, as they develop to the point where they're as sophisticated and as developed as this is, that we'll have then the social kinds of understandings around these tools ready to go at the same time. That's our hope. That's what we're trying to put together. We need your help to do that.
Right.
So that's a long answer to your question, Lynn.
I would agree that the group dynamics within a virtual world are very similar to what you have in the real world, where if you get too many people, the noise level of the conversation, basically your brain starts to tune it out, and then you start focusing on the 3 or 4 people around you. Well, if you're in a group of 15, you could probably manage all 15 people. The same thing goes with text chat. If you're actually not speaking in Ventrilo or Skype, but you're actually involved in a text chat group, once you start getting above 20 people, your brain starts to have a hard time following the thread of the conversation. Other questions? Yeah?
Is there, or could it be designed a post board or a bulletin board so that when groups are there meeting, be it 2 or 20 people, that we could be notified that it is a group together and not just a bunch of avatars that have come there trying to find friends?
It's a common thing. And Sarah and I interact, we have this issue all the time when we're in there working because we're working there now. And people, want to interrupt us and bug us because we also interact in here socially after work as well. And, one of the things you can do is set up calendars, web calendars, to schedule meetings in certain locations. You could build things in worlds. We could, set up a structure in the boardroom or in the lecture hall, which basically is a sign, and you click it that says "class in progress." So if someone walks there, it wasn't in the original design, but it's totally doable.
Yeah, good idea.
Yeah.
There.
Could you show us a little bit about how you can bring content into the
Oh,
teaching environment?
Yep.
And in particular, could you also, in that same vein, talk a little bit about streaming media as one of the content pieces? Because we've
Right.
seen them up on some of the video walls.
Right. The way, when you bring video and music into Second Life, that's attached to the land, which is a little bit unfortunate right now. I'd love you to be able to, have a video screen with your avatar that you can walk around, and no matter where you go, it's playing your jukebox or it's playing your movie, but that's not feasible right now. What it's essentially doing is you're giving it a URL to something that's streaming out in the web, and it opens up, if it's video, it opens up a window within Second Life. Just like you have a window of QuickTime in your browser, but it appears here and it plays. You haven't actually loaded the movie into Second Life. You haven't loaded the music into Second Life. It's connecting to a streaming server on the web. What you do load, however, is textures. All the images and pictures that you see. That blue screen there, that's an image that Corey built in Photoshop with multiple layers, flattened it out into a TGA file, and then brought it back in. And when it comes into Second Life, if you want to get technical for a second, it gets converted with the JPEG 2000 compression formula, which is why a lot of people do use Targa, so it comes in as high quality as possible, then it gets compressed to a smaller file. One of the things to think about when you're building is the size of your textures. Lag is an important factor. The number of prims, the type of prims, and the complexity of your prims can affect people's frame rate when they're interacting in Second Life. And the size of your textures can also impact people's experience as well. So one of the things we try to do is optimize. You try to use the smallest texture that you can for the particular purpose. Now there are times when you need to have a big texture because you want it very crisp and very focused. But if it's just a wall, for example, that's sort of in the background, you can really shrink it down so it's 128 pixels by 128 pixels and load that in instead. Is that answering your question, or you?
And Wendy had a question, and then I'm sensitive to the fact that we promised a beer bash to this part. And so why don't we take Wendy's question, maybe one more, and then we'll move out to the foyer where we can continue this more informally. We have a big plasma screen set up there, and we can have questions actually right up next to it, and we'll continue it out there. So Wendy?
Well, first of all, I want to say that this is magnificent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I kept going in as it was being built. It was just incredible to watch this thing. And you just showed, Corey, you just showed flowers.
Yes.
Right.
Those are pictures that you were putting on something?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
What happened was I found a pretty decent source image on the web of these flowers, cropped them out, duplicated them, tinted them, set it in as an alpha, saved it as a Targa 32-bit, and imported it, and then applied it to a prim.
Everyone understand that? Make a lot of sense? Within Photoshop, for those of you who Photoshop, alpha channel is a particular type of channel when it comes into Second Life. That's what tells Second Life that it should be invisible. That's why it's not a flower on a white background, but it actually is just the flowers themselves.
View of them, though.
Right. Let me show
Ah,
you.
that's because show the prims itself.
Yep. And
It's too crisscrossed. So actually, as you pan around, it looks like it's three-dimensional. There's a lot of tricks of the trade in terms of building in Second Life to make things effective with as few prims as possible. If you end up going out and getting your own plot, it's lovely to have a full island like this. You can really indulge and make things magnificent. If you go and get your own little 512 plot in Second Life to experiment around, you don't actually get that many prims. These little building blocks to work with. And so you have to really think about how you can make the coolest thing that you want in the fewest possible pieces. Which is why a lot of people go and build in the sandboxes. Now, in the sandboxes of Second Life, unfortunately, you get a lot of misbehaving people as well that come in and think it's really fun to go shoot people with guns and do silly things like that. There are some quiet ones you could find. But in the sandbox, the prims you have to work with are unlimited. So some of the best creators, actually, in Second Life just work in the sandboxes because they don't have to pay Linda Lab a lot of money to have a big plot of land to work. They go to a sandbox and they make these magnificently huge towers and creations in these sandboxes.
You and I were talking last night, I can't do any of this in Second Life, but I was exploring because I was interested in the ideas. And the reality sort of check, I guess, what I want to say that you and I were discussing last night is, I found myself worried about me when I wasn't there. And so Rachel gave me the location of a place that's safe, and I can only, most of the time when I'm doing this, it's after my son goes to bed, so it's 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock at night where I meet very strange people to begin with.
Which you will do in Second Life.
So Rachel gave me a safe place, and when I leave Second Life at night, I take her to the safe place and I sit her down where I know nobody's going to find her. And I find myself worrying about her. And then you gave me this sort of ultimate scenario that you also take your avatar to some place where you know you're going to remember where you're going. When you get there again, you'll know where you are.
Right. I don't want to log in and all of a sudden I'm in a strange place with people talking around me and I'm sort of interrupting by appearing out of thin air in the middle of a conversation. So yeah.
I just think that it's so real that
Yeah.
there are times when I have problems figuring out who I am.
Yeah.
When I
Great.
first started, I thought it was very important for me to have a house and a bed that my avatar could go and lay down in before I logged out. Like she was just going to be sleeping there until I came back the next day and she'd wake up. Yeah, it took a little while for me to get out of it. Probably about a year before I really got out of that habit. And
I had a situation where Rachel actually went and visited the campus while it was being built, and I hadn't been back, and then you had the opening. And when I came back, I was inside one of your mountains.
Right.
I remember that. I'm not sure how that happened still, but I'm glad we got you out.
But if we're going to break and go out, I guess the one thing I would say in conclusion is that a lot of Second Life right now is wild and woolly on the consumer side of it, as opposed to the more professional projects that we're doing. And there's all sorts of experimental behavior, and even a lot of it can be quite ugly because, let's face it, a lot of it is really an amateur doodle pad for people who just want to play around creating things, and it's this really neat canvas for you to work in. But don't let that side of it put you off, because there's a lot of potential here to work with people, to break through geographic barriers, to experiment with using something like this as a sort of a next generation WebEx for professional purposes, or using it for educational things to demonstrate the physics of how a ball travels in an arc, or to do distance learning, or to have a conference if you've got curators in museums around the country that want to get together to have a conversation, to bring people into one place and feel like you're actually together if you can't be in the same room. There's a lot of serious applications that can be done on top of Second Life, as well as the play side of it, and I encourage you all to explore more.
So thanks to you, Gev. Thanks, Sarah. And I should mention that while these two we're privileged to have here with us, they represent an amazing company, folks, the Electric Sheep Company, that are fellow travelers, really, with the NMC, and there's a bunch of them. And so we'll talk about them out in the hallway. Let's go drink some beer. Thank you for coming.
put it in standby, otherwise it has conniptions later. Yeah. I'll get it. You can grab, that's your mouse?
That's my mouse.
Yeah, you can